Hello, welcome. I am really excited. I've recorded one of these videos a couple months ago before I moved to Thailand, and the screen recording wasn't showing. So I am going to record another one, and this is all about the bioenergetic mast cell activation histamine intolerant scan. If you are someone who is confused, if you're struggling with histamine stuff, do I have mast cell activation? Do I just have histamine issues? Is it going to be a quick fix, or am I kind of in it for the long haul? Am I a really hypersensitive individual and I'm not quite sure it's histamine because I don't have histamine, classic histamine type symptoms like itching or hives or rashes or stuffiness? I don't know, what to avoid, and I don't know how to stabilize whatever I'm dealing with, and I can't tolerate protocols and supplements. If you are in those categories, this is going to be an awesome scan for you. My colleague Jordan and she's the one running all the scans, and she and I helped to put this together. We combined what she was already studying and what was already in the Quest 4 machine with some of the things from my mast cell activation and histamine intolerance ebook and guide. So if you want to download that, it's only $25. You can download that in the show notes. But otherwise, I'm showing you guys the raw data that comes up when we do the scan. And this is an add-on scan. It's not an at by itself scan, because the add-on scan incorporates multiple other scans, including a root cause scan. I do a mineral scan for everybody. We look at drainage and detox pathways. We look at neurotransmitters and hormones and toxins that might be contributing. So the scan is really comprehensive, and this can be an add-on at no additional charge currently as I record this. And then I also do a full emotional, generational, limiting belief scan that goes deep into the emotional side of symptoms. And wouldn't you know, it almost always lines up with what someone is dealing with on that physical level. So the mast cell activation scan, again, is going to be great for understanding what's really driving the sensitivities or that specific condition, and also what is going to help to stabilize that condition or those symptoms. Because what I find is that people just spend so much money and spin their wheels, and myself included, trying to figure out what they can actually take. And then they spend all this money, and then it's great advice, but they can't do or take any of the things that is being recommended. And people's worlds get smaller and smaller, and the foods that they're eating become less and less. And then we need more interventions with more nutrition. So that's the main reason I wanted to incorporate this scan. I tend to work with a population of people who fall into one or two categories, and I have a post on this. Are there two types of MCAS? I was the type of person who just could do or take almost anything, but nothing worked. There was no ups and downs. It was just chronic, relentless inflammation that was getting worse nonstop. Literally, I didn't have any almost any periods of, oh, I think I'm getting better, or oh, that went away, and that must have been a trigger. It was so hard to pinpoint exactly what was happening because I just kept cutting everything out until I got down to like the full carnivore diet, not just food, but also cutting out like, oh, well, I was doing that thing, or I was using that conditioner and that soap, and you go crazy trying to figure it out. And then there's the second type, which is the very hypersensitivity, almost immediate reactions to things. So oh, I didn't do well with that, or I couldn't tolerate that, or within 30 minutes I was feeling like this after I ate that food, or after I went outside, and or after I got in that cold water. Like the sensitivity gets so intense that that type of person has a really hard time with almost any sort of change, even a positive change. So even like nervous system regulation or relaxation, sometimes that can even be triggering. So without further ado, let's get into the results. And I have two because they were ran at two different times, but there's a lot of overlap. So you'll see these are my scans, and my mast cell activation, or the experience that I had, is pretty much resolved, if not pretty stable. I do still have, or I had, lifelong histamine intolerance and histamine sensitivity. And you'll see by some of the things that came up as to probably why, genetically, and also some of the like personality traits that can like really further exacerbate that as well. And then what's the other thing? It slipped my mind, but let's get started. So the first test is this one here, and there's going to be a lot of overlap on the two scans, but a big theme that comes up on both of them is candida, leaky gut, um, intestinal inflammation. And that was absolutely a huge part of the symptoms that I had. Candida has come up on almost every bioenergetic scan I've ever ran. If you guys know my story, I experienced 15 years of alcoholism, I would say. Um, Still very high functioning, never physically addicted, but like very high into the party scene. So weekends were always spent drinking, and for probably 8 to 10 years, so were a lot of weeknights. And this was very generational as well. So I'm sure that I got passed down a lot of deficiencies based on the high amount of alcohol use that was in my parents and my grandparents, my great grandparents, and just all of those generations. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because when you have um, high amounts of alcohol use, that can really, really disrupt the gut, obviously, and many other systems, but the gut especially, and can lead to fungal overgrowth. So, there are many days I had like the thrush on my tongue when I was younger, and drinking a lot as well. And then you'll also see phase 2 liver detox down here. That's another aspect of the body that's really going to be impacted by heavy alcohol use, the liver, obviously. So here's leaky gut formula. I will also mention that with mast cell activation, there's a lot of overlap with certain conditions, and I go into this in detail in my guide slash ebook, is things like connective tissue disorders, which I was always hypermobile, but it never bothered me until after I got sick. And then that inflammation in the connective tissue, the destabilization of the joints really started to cause a lot of chronic pain, which you'll see in this test. One of the things that came up is this substance P, which is a neurotransmitter that transmits pain receptors. So when this pops up, that's like a red flag for struggling with chronic pain issues. And again, possibly could be related to some of the aftermath of the connective tissue inflammation and the joints being unstable. Now, you're going to see a lot of genetic mutations listed here, and I actually have self decode. I had a really extensive genetic panel done with another company, not self decode, but I actually uploaded it to self decode so that I could easily search genes. It's really awesome. So we won't go through all of them, but I went through probably like 6 or 7. And what I noticed is on the actual test results, you'll see double mutation, no mutation, and you're going to see over here a dilution. Um, the M's tend to be more in the energetic realm when it comes to some of the markers, not all of the markers. So something like a hormone, for example, it wouldn't mean the same if you see an M next to it. But I found that the ones that seemed to be correct were in a different dilution. The ones that seemed to be not correct were in these M dilutions. So, for example, this one, I do not have a double mutation here. That's the one I just pulled up, the 543. Yeah, so this one basically means that I have full functioning of this enzyme. And looking at, or coming back to like, well, what does this mean? This is, the can be something passed down generationally, or something that was or is generational. So it makes me question about maybe a family member experiencing this, and then that also, even though I don't necessarily have that mutation, that coming down the line, it might affect pregnancy, my development, things like that. Um, Again, the ones that were like very correct, the DAO enzyme ones, I have a lot of SNPs there. And some of the other MTHFRs were also pretty correct. Now you'll also see that there is methyl support coming up. So let's say even if you're like, well, half are correct, half are not correct. So what am I supposed to think about that? When you look up a lot of the recommendations for methyl support, like you can see here, ALA, IC3, there's a few others that have come up for me. This one doesn't specifically say methyl support, but folinic acid, which is kind of in that category of things that could support methylation based on some of the SNPs. We'll see. I'll just go ahead and say that everything that I've ever done, every test that I've ever done almost in my whole life, I feel like has recommended these types of fruits and veggies, cruciferous vegetables. And it's something that I have a really hard time eating. So, but basically, a lot of these will support that pathway that helps to break down estrogen, and estrogen dominance. I have pretty much always had my whole life as well. And then we also see ALA. This one also comes up on every single bioenergetic scan that I have ever done. And you can see it's not in an M, it's in a C. This one's in an X. So that is like physical support that we could benefit from, either food-based or sometimes supplementation. Cell salts, potassium cell salts continue to resonate on both of the tests that I have. You'll see that on the other one as well. And potassium itself is a good marker when it's on the HTMA of the cellular effect of cortisol. Now, I know this isn't the HTMA, but my potassium, and I think most women kind of struggle with the potassium level on the HTMA. It's kind of chronically always been low unless I was in these crazy 4 highs patterns. But potassium, it needs to be inside the cell, and it helps to synthesize things to come into the cell, like thyroid hormone, for example. But the sodium potassium pump helps to allow things to come in and allow waste to come out. And a cell salt is kind of like a homeopathic version of the mineral. So it's not the actual mineral, but it's the information of that mineral. So it can help to repair receptor sites. And this makes a lot of sense for me because one of the things that, or when we think about the cellular effect of cortisol, what that means is essentially cortisol resistance. And I talk about this a lot in consults, and I've yet to see anyone really speak about this topic. Everyone says high cortisol is bad, low cortisol is worse, you're in the resistance stage. And I've had extremely low cortisol since going through topical steroid withdrawal. Don't know what it was before because I never tested it. Um, Actually, I did test it in like 2015, and I don't remember what it was, but I'll have to get that back out. I believe actually it was low back then, now that I'm thinking about it, because I remember Dave Asprey talking about taking essentially synthetic cortisol, which is what sent me into topical steroid withdrawal. So don't do that. But I remember thinking that could be an option if I could just find a doctor to prescribe it. So I'm pretty sure my cortisol has been low for a really long time. And potassium helps the body to become more synthesized and respond better to cortisol. So if we're getting in potassium, but our receptor sites for cortisol are impacted by this low potassium or changes to potassium in the body, I wonder, is that something that's potentially driving the cortisol to remain low? Because we want our cells to respond appropriately to cortisol. So if we think about insulin resistance, the cells stop responding to insulin because it was too high for too long. So maybe with cortisol, too high for too long means damaged receptor cell sites, and then we don't respond the same. And that kind of makes sense for the inflammation I was experiencing with especially mast cell activation, chronic body pain as well. This has to do with imprinting a tincture, so that doesn't give me any information. Self-soothing techniques, quite a variety of programs in here. So EFT tapping is a psychosensory technique. You can look this up. It's excellent at like processing and yeah, like processing and mind body. It's acupressure. So also there's a release aspect to it. So it's a somatic release. Phase 2 liver detox. This is where we're going to be moving out toxicity, including mold and metals and also estrogen. So again, another theme. Ultraviolet rays as a harmful energy, and this is coming up as something physical. So I wonder about my exposure to the sun. I'm staying in the sun maybe a little too long for my body type, which I kind of always have because I love the sun. You can see just a plain MTHFR marker came up, and everybody has some SNPs here, and I definitely do. Everybody knows the two most common MTHFR SNPs, but there's a ton. So you can see here that everybody's going to have some SNPs in MTHFR. So it's not about, oh, I have one. That means I need this one supplement. Here you go. Here's a couple different SNPs as just an example. And you can see, yeah, everybody has some. So not a big deal, but we want to support what we need the right way. Then I have my 6-layer model of mast cell activation in here. And at the outermost core is layer 6, and that is the cell danger response, the uh, uncontrolled, relentless inflammation, sympathetic activation. Layer 5 is the why. Why do we have cell danger response and mast cell activation? Well, we've got chronic infections, chronic immune and nervous system activation. So when I first did this test, this was resonating as the biggest priority. And that kind of makes sense with some of the candida markers coming up as well and some of the other toxins that resonated. We have another self-soothing technique, laying on the earth. No surprise, I was massively overworking at the time and on the computer all day. We have more support for methylation, cod liver oil, which is a really good source of vitamin A, vitamin D, and essential fatty acids. Here we have another potassium cell salt. The DAO enzyme is what helps to break down histamine in the gut. And I have known for a while that I do have quite a few mutations in the DAO enzyme. Here's that candida. Here's another self-soothing technique, yoga, tai chi, qigong. So very gentle, not over exercising. We've got some estrogen, xenoestrogen compounds here, BPA, which disrupts estrogen in the body. Then we have Coxsackie virus. So this is a very common virus. Everybody gets exposed to it. Um, it could potentially, it's been studied for being kind of like a retrovirus, which makes sense that Vicodin skull cap will come up. Oh, I actually accidentally switched scans. Let's go back to the one I was on. Serotonin. This is another big theme that actually came up a couple times. So yeah, here's the other one. So serotonin and histamine tend to be opposite of each other. You can see here, histamine also resonated. And when histamine is high, histamine is very stimulatory. Oftentimes serotonin's low, or it can affect serotonin metabolism. So, and then of course, when we have a lot of stress in the gut, candida overgrowth, leaky gut, most of our serotonin is produced in the gut. So all of that is going to affect serotonin, and this affects how we feel emotionally. Do we feel satisfied and happy and peaceful and calm? And of course, if you are listening and you have struggled with this stuff, it's very hard to feel that way when you are itching, like an insane amount of itching. You just feel like you cannot calm down. You cannot be still because there's always an itch. There's always like something getting your attention, reminding you that there's a problem. Here's another bacteria, or this is another pathogen, mycoplasma. I actually did have a diagnosis of mycoplasma about like 6 months ago, but they don't go as as deep as in the symptoms. So and the species, there's a lot of different types of mycoplasma, and they all kind of have um, a different kind of way that they affect the body. So mycoplasma does not have a cell wall. It's one celled. It's very, very tiny, and it's part of our flora. So it's kind of like candida. When we have an imbalance in our terrain, something like mycoplasma can overgrow. Let's see. This is a type of herb that would be supportive, although it's in an M dilution, so not something I would prioritize because it's not something that's like we need this in the physical. Babesia, this is a microscopic parasite that is very heavily linked with POTS symptoms, which I did have pretty bad, poor circulation, heart racing, dizziness for a while there. POTS, connective tissue symptoms, hypermobility, and mast cell activation often go hand in hand. And I also failed to mention back up when in relation to the neurotransmitters, serotonin. So serotonin, dopamine, histamine, when there's imbalances here, you can start to have even more of these like overlapping or what they call comorbid conditions, which is like ADHD or neurodivergence. Babesia, also, since it's a parasite, it's going to drive up your eosinophils, which mine have always been really, really high on labs, and they were trending down last I had lab work, continuously going down, but still not in normal range. Here's another supportive. So this one's for pain recovery, CBD oil. I actually used to use a lot of CBD oil when I was sick because can help to stabilize mast cells. There are other types of not just CBD, but like CBN and things like that that can also help with pain. Although, again, this one's in an M dilution, so not really one I would prioritize either. We also have some stress in the kidneys, the respiratory system. I've had asthma my whole life. Here's another mycoplasma. And then here's a supportive herbal, which I've actually taken this one before. So you can see it helps with all sorts of things here. Now I want to show you the other one, which was done at a different time. So I already kind of brought it up. So here's some more um, genetic markers. Here's Biclin skullcap again. So this is a really good immune support. But you can see all the things that it helps to support, even some genetic markers, some metabolic markers. I have not taken this one before. It had never come up on my bioenergetics before, but something definitely to consider. Next, Vomica. This one I have taken before, quite a few times actually. So it's a homeopathic remedy that can help with, sometimes it'll come up for like never well since the effects of hangover, debauchery, which, made sense when I think about what Nux vomica is used for, but some of those like addiction type symptoms. Another deficiency in DAO came up. Sensitivity to cotton. Here's the heavy metal. Fascia, needing a Hertz frequency support. So I can just type that into YouTube or something and find that. Again, this is like that connective tissue piece. Here's another histamine came up, another candida. Glutamine, this is an amino acid that helps to support the gut. It helps, it's kind of like food for the gut. But also you can see it picks up ammonia molecules from the central nervous system, delivers to the kidneys for elimination. So ammonia and ammonia, glutamate, some of these can be big histamine triggers as well. And our body naturally gets rid of them, but when we're low in things that support that, then it can build up. GABA, this is also it's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it helps with relaxation, decreases anxiety, and histamine and GABA usually are kind of opposite as well. So if histamine's high, GABA is going to be lower. Here's cod liver oil. Again, it came up twice. Cheese, buffalo milk specifically came up as a support. Green tea as a methyl support. It's not in an M dilution, so I'm thinking it's a good fit. And I actually was taking green tea for quite some time. Systems affected nervous system, of course. That's my whole niche. Here's serotonin again. Brain homeostasis, Lyme disease nosodes came up. So this is not the actual bacteria, but a nosode. So this is like a homeopathic remedy to help support that. Industrial pollutants as a trigger. Here we have layer 2. So this is going to be, we had layer 5 on the other one, which was chronic infections and immune system activation. Okay, well, why? Underneath that is organ stagnation, pathways not working. Okay, well, why wouldn't they be working? Layer 2 is going to be that chronic stress, mental, emotional, physical trauma perceived that's affecting the detox pathways, the way our body works. It's affecting nutrients and the hormones that regulate nutrients. And then layer 1 is going to be core beliefs and attachment wounds. And then also you could put generational and trauma on there too. Here's another homeopathic signature, which can help to support endocrine system affected. You can see both of those match. Injury trauma signature. So an injury or trauma that kind of was a big trigger for like why all this started. And it definitely did. Here's the cell salts again on this one. For this one, singing, chanting, drumming came up as a self-soothing technique. More cheese as a sensitivity. More metals as a trigger. Antioxidants, buffered ascorbic acid. This almost always comes up on my bioenergetic scans too. Another self-soothing technique, ice pack on the back of the neck that can help to activate that vagus nerve as well. More materials, silk, down, cotton, which, makes sense. I really have been sensitive to certain fabrics since my skin was peeling and melting off. No surprise. Then we have this one's an emotional trigger. Location is the stress or the trigger. So I had lived in the same apartment that I had gotten sick in. So no surprise, part of me deciding to move was I want to have some different triggers, external triggers, because your subconscious is constantly reminded of the things that were stressful or traumatic to us, even if it's just in the things we love, our furniture and our house and things like that. Selenium, part of my genetic predispositions is needing more selenium, and I've seen a lot of improvement with selenium. IgE, these are the immunoglobulins that are responsible for the allergic response. More dyes. Bicarbonate. So this is something that can help stabilize mast cell. It's on my histamine guide on how to do that. You can also look it up, but they can help to stop a flare or pull you out of a trigger or just help to stabilize the condition in general. And here's a mycotoxin, spinach, which is kind of random for a sensitivity, but I actually don't really like or eat spinach. And then Candida came up again. So what we do with this information, obviously, is we're going to compare this with everything else that comes up on the other scans, with the physical root cause scan, with the emotional scan, with the scan that's looking at what remedies are going to help balance. And we make a decision together with the plan of what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, the order we're going to do things in. Especially if you're really, really sensitive, you have to work with somebody who is going to answer your emails when the plan fell through, because that happens with so many people I work with. And I answer all of my own emails and we figure it out, right? There's always a way to figure it out, even if you feel like I literally can't do almost anything. I do also offer that emotional support track, transformation coaching, where I teach the somatic awareness, somatic listening, desensitization, self-soothing techniques. So there's always something that we can do that we can work through. So hopefully this gives you some hope for understanding just yourself a little bit better and what direction to go in. Thank you.